a couple of minutes. There's still some people that are logging in. We've had messages saying they're joining now. So if you just give us a couple of minutes and we will get things moving ASAP. Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. As I mentioned before, thank you for joining us today. My name is Lewis Finn. I'm the Global Sales Director at API Global. And with me today, I'm pleased to announce I have Liam Smith, who is the Global Managing Partner and Head of APIX, and Director and Co-founder of Hatchbury, John Kennedy. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Lewis.
What I want to do today is, I'm sure we've got people on the webinar that have are either invested with us before, or if you're our distribution partners, you certainly know what and sort of who API are and what we do. So I'm going to keep the API component, I suppose, relatively short, if that's possible. I'm not going to try and drag on. What we're going to get stuck into today more so is Hatchbury's background. So John's going to go into sort of his previous experience and what Hatchbury have done since inception. And then we're going to get stuck into more about Birmingham, where the investment case is, where we see pockets of value, and where we see the huge potential and really the sensational investment case that Paper Yard can offer. So a bit about API Global, founded in 2013 by the gentleman on my screen. So nearly in our 14th year, coming to the end of year 13. And over that time period, we've expanded now to 19 offices globally, from having a presence in South America, all over through Europe, the UK and Africa, into the Middle East, Asia, and finally, we're present in Australia. Over the last 13 years, we've delivered over £2 billion in real estate. We manage over 1,500 units currently with our lettings and management business, and have sold over 5,000 units globally. Predominantly, we're a UK business, a UK real estate. Over the last couple of years, we've diversified into other markets as well, but UK is still the primary market that we do. Sort of 85-90% of the business will be UK assets. Now, within the group, we have different subsidiaries. So API Global sits at the top. That's the mothership, you can call it. That is the distribution platform and the conduit for developers getting access to the international markets that we operate in. We then have 5 different subsidiaries. So API Capital Partners is all about equity deployment and working with sort of administrators and receiverships, and how we can carve out deals that way. APIX, which Liam heads up, is our sports and athletes desk. Redstone is our lettings and management business. So we don't just sell you an asset, we also manage it for you post-completion. Valorem Global is the mortgage brokerage that we have, and GoGo Prop is a bridging finance vehicle. So if you can't get a conventional mortgage or you need capital quickly, we can typically utilize that within a 2 to 3 week period. Now, what do we do as a business? Well, first and foremost, we are a market research company. It's our job to identify and research and analyze areas where we believe investors are going to get true value for money. And we look all over, not just the UK now, but different markets, and really identify where the macro and microeconomic fundamentals, where the drivers are, where the pulls are, and where demand is essentially outstripping supply. Once we've identified that particular area, postcode or location, it's then about sourcing the projects. It's then about doing our own due diligence and finding reputable developers such as Hatchbury, and looking at how we can take this type of product to market to our global audience and network. Point 1 and 2 is all pre-launch. Point 3 is then the investment advice. That's where me and my team will sit down with you as our distribution partners or your investors and clientele to really understand your needs, your wants and requirements, and essentially reverse engineer what it is you're looking for. A lot of the problems we will see or face from an investor perspective is they want to invest, but they don't know how to. The solution is API as a business provide that end-to-end platform, which allows you to invest in a hands-off, hassle-free way, and essentially look at it as an investment that you'd put into the stock market, whereby you sit back, you watch the asset grow, but in a property terms, you also get paid a dividend every month in form of rental income. Now, point 4 to 8 is all the back office side of things. So once you've agreed a reservation and you proceed with paper yard plot 205 as an example, we then don't want you to navigate the off-plan build or the legal process on your own. We've got a team in place across our global offices that will hold your hand for every step of the process. That could be introducing you to the right conveyancing team that will understand your requirements. From a legality perspective, make sure that the contracts stack up, the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and also at this point conduct the AML and due diligence on you as an investor. We then have a marketing team which will provide quarterly construction updates, of which you'll see some of the footage today of where paper yard's up to as of last week. Typically 6 to 9 months before completion, Valorem Global will reach out to you as an investor or our distribution partners to start that mortgage process if you are taking financing. And then we also have a tax and accountancy business as well. So depending on your liabilities or exposure to UK income tax, we'd advise whether you should hold it through a limited company or hold it for your personal name, depending on where you currently are. Point 9 and 10 is then post handover. So lettings and management is essentially one of the most crucial parts, because if you're based in Turkey or Africa or the US or Europe, wherever it may be, you don't want to be trying to navigate Rightmove or Zoopla and trying to find a tenant for yourself. So Redstone, which is the in-house lettings and management business, essentially provide that end-to-end solution post-completion. The tenant finding, the tenant sourcing, the tenant referencing, making sure the council tax is up to date, make sure the bills are paid, but also from the maintenance side of things, making sure that you're not getting phone calls over a weekend or over a late of an evening to say that the boiler's broke. And then for me, what really stands us out from everyone else in the market is sort of that ongoing advice and review, which is essentially a portfolio optimization. And this is where we integrate AI and technology and machine learning, which I think is sort of the buzzword currently, and how you integrate tech into almost everything. And it's about how we can give constant advice to what your portfolio's looking like. So I think we can all agree in UK real estate, you don't get rich overnight. It is very much a medium to long-term play. But over, let's say, a 5, 7, 10-year period, you get quite a different picture from when you first started. So our team on the ground would provide you with support of where you should hold the asset, sell the asset, release equity from the asset, redeploy that capital and go again. Or it could be as simple as refinancing because there's better interest rates in the market, your outgoings less, your net income is then higher. Essentially a one-stop shop, a plug and play for an investor and our distribution partners, wherever you are in the world. John, if I can introduce you now, if you could just give a bit of background, I suppose, about yourself, about your brother Patrick, who is also the co-founder alongside yourself, what you've done in your previous experience and where Hatchbury was really born from.
Thanks, Lewis. So we formed Hatchbury in 2013. I was a frustrated residential development agent working for Knight Frank within the M25. Patrick had a career in construction. And we wanted to create an opportunity for ourselves to set up Hatchbury and initially to build property within the M25. It was actually Patrick, to be fair, who realised that there was much more opportunity outside these major cities within an hour, 2 hours of London, and hence why we set up this Birmingham, Oxford, Bristol triangle. And our first project, well, the first couple of projects were in London, but we then realised that actually we wanted to move out, do bigger things. And that's what took us to Bristol, and that led us to our first one, which was Guild Heritage House in 2014-15. And then we've moved up to Birmingham, and obviously currently doing Paper Yard at the moment, but this was preceded by Photographic Works in the Jewellery Quarter. And that's where we are today, and obviously we've just started on another site in Bath, and currently trying to negotiate another site in Bristol as we speak.
Excellent. Okay, and if you don't mind me asking, so what was the rationale, rather than being a nationwide developer, rather than going up and down the country and trying to find different locations in different cities, what specifically is it within that triangle of the M4, M5, M40? Is it that one you and Patrick like, and I suppose how well you've seen it delivered compared to maybe other locations?
Well, I don't know. It's accessibility first and foremost, to not only to London, but the ability to get abroad, and certainly Bristol and Birmingham certainly offer this with a good infrastructure they already have in place and has been improved at the time. Why do we not go nationwide? Well, that's primarily we want to be masters of one area rather than throwing ourselves all over the country, and really be experts within that area.
Good. And obviously you're from the more residential agency side. Patrick is more on the project management side. How would you typically split the roles? Like what would that look like when you're looking at a site?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately Patrick deals with the day-to-day running of construction. He is the meat and potatoes, and I deal with all the frilly bits. So sales, legals, finance. Patrick is the one who actually builds it. He's the one who's got the experience and the knowledge of that. And then I deal with ultimately the purchase of the site and the sale of the apartments. It's
a great analogy. I don't think I've ever been called the meat and potatoes, so that's a new one. Okay, great. And where do you sort of foresee your next opportunity? Do you think it's after the one in Bath? Do you think you'll stay within that triangle again?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're not going to vary outside that triangle. As I said before, we want to be an expert in that area.
Yeah.
We don't want to be going down to the likes of whether it be Cornwall or going up to Leeds or Manchester. We don't have the knowledge of it. So we spent a number of years knowing the likes of Birmingham, whether it be Bristol. Oxford is an incredibly hard market to get into, but we will always explore. Absolutely.
Well, I think the common trend, certainly between Oxford, Bristol, and Birmingham, is the student population and sort of the retention rate of students post that, and all three, the connectivity to London, which is what you sort of focused on. So yeah, I can definitely see the trends. I can definitely see the reason why and the rationale, and we're going to lean into more of that, I suppose, throughout the presentation. What I'd like to do now is hand over to Liam Smith, who I mentioned earlier is a global management partner and head of APIX for API Global.
Thanks, Lewis. Yeah, so I'm going to touch on Birmingham as a city, the location, why you'd invest there. The next few slides are going to be more about the sort of strategic idea behind Papeyard and why John and Hatchbury bought that particular site in what is a fantastic city core. So Birmingham, I think like John just said there, strategically it's placed in the middle of the country. So it's very accessible both by rail, road and air. It's even going to be more accessible to London with the HS2 project, which we will come on to shortly, give you some updates on that. But it's underpinned by, the pillars of any investment. You need a great economy, great employment, great graduate retention rates, and obviously regeneration and strong capital appreciation, growth and rental. So you can see on the screen there some pretty big figures. The city itself has got a shy of £61 billion economy, which is part of a wider 90 billion regional economy. So you can see that obviously the vast majority of that regional business is actually done in the city itself, which is very important. It's a growing population. It's the second largest population in the UK, so it is UK's second city, so second just to London. But you can see on the screen there that the growth projection. So if you were to buy a residential property in Birmingham today, that the projected growth over the next 5-6 years is upwards of 25%. And we've also got upwards of sort of 20% rental increases over that sort of time as well. So you're going to want to know why there's that kind of growth. And I think that's what we're going to lean into with a conversation about Birmingham in the next few slides. But there's a few key things on this particular slide to note. Graduate retention rate is exceptionally important, and also the city's population and the average age of that, which we're going to get into in the next few pages. Should we go on to the next one, Lewis?
Yeah, I think I've probably got one question just to ask before we do. What would be your personal opinion, Liam, of obviously the HS2 is one of the largest, if not the largest, infrastructure projects in Europe, not just the UK?
Correct, yeah.
Besides that, what would you say sort of underpinning the major growth within Birmingham as a city?
The economy itself, this is already an established city. This is a world-class city. So 15 years ago, actually, the local authority went out for international investment to bring in pension funds and global funds to invest in the infrastructure, the commercial buildings. And in turn, we've now got some world-class financial centres. We've got HSBC, you've got PwC, accountancy firms. They're all moving into Birmingham because it's a cheaper cost of operation than it is in London. And obviously, with it being in the heart of the country, it's obviously very accessible to get into as well. Now, that essentially has led to the UK, one of the UK's strongest graduate retention rates. So I think a long-winded answer to your question is there's a few fundamentals, but I do think it is the retention rate of students, which is only now possible because of all of the investment 10 years ago into those commercial office buildings that's now attracted such these large key employers like your HSBCs, for example.
Yeah, and I think that probably leads us on quite nicely about, just before we go into the regeneration side of things, but the opportunity within, certainly from a landlord perspective, it's around 40% of Birmingham's population are under 30. Now, if you look at the average first-time buyer age now across the UK as a whole, we're about 36, 37. So if you've got 40% of the population actually under 30, from a landlord, it's sensational news. It's unbelievable, because you've got that long-term tenant profile that can't afford to buy. Cost of living is too high for them. It's going to take them longer to save up a deposit. And without having guaranteed rent, you've got guaranteed rent almost.
100%. It's actually the youngest average population in the whole of Europe. And most of these people that are of that age want to live in the city centres, obviously by their place of work. So, you know, that is the key demographic, right? For anyone that's looking to invest in a city, whether it be Manchester, London, Birmingham, Bristol, they're looking at the key demographic of tenants. And that's that young professional, as soon as they graduate, between 21 to 35, 36, like you said, Lewis, before they buy. That's 10, 15 years where they're renting. And I think Paper Yard, you'll come on to in a minute in terms of the location, is perfectly placed to take advantage of that young age group and the demographic of people working in the business district.
100%. Now, any sort of growth story fundamentally comes from regeneration of an area. On the screen, you can see 9 different regeneration projects, which, if you don't mind just touching briefly on them all, but I think for what I'd like to know, and I know probably the audience as well, is which one do you think has the biggest knock-on effect or impact as to why Paper Yard and that specific location is really going to grow in value?
Yeah, so HS2 is obviously big news, and there's been a load of uncertainty about HS2. I think the media have portrayed it as a project that will never happen, and I think there's a lot of confusion overseas. Certainly, when I'm speaking to international investors, first thing they say is, "Well, it's not happening." Well, HS2 to Birmingham to London is very advanced. There's been a lot of positive media about HS2 recently as well, because you can now see clear construction projects. There's viaducts, there's tunnels being built all across the country. Now, this infrastructure change, that one of the biggest infrastructure investments in the world, is going to have such an impact on Birmingham's house prices. JLL have actually projected that anything within a 15-minute walk of HS2 Curzon Street is going to increase from today's values to post-delivery by 55%. Now, that's a global research centre saying that over the next 10 years, that's potentially how much of an uplift you could potentially gain. Now, Paper Yard is very, very close to HS2. I walked it the other day. I'm not a particularly fast walker. It took me 12 minutes. So it's perfectly positioned for that growth. But look, Birmingham is, every single pocket of the city is under construction. We've got, on the screen there, you can see Paradise. So just so people know, it's a £700 million commercial district. That's where PwC are headquartered. That's less than 10 minutes from Paper Yard. Arena Central is a mixed-use commercial zone. That's where HSBC's head office is. It's less than 10 minutes walk from Paper Yard. So all of these things are very relevant to Paper Yard, not just Birmingham as a whole, really. And
John, I imagine these are the sort of things that you look for when you're looking at site acquisition. Do you look at proximity to regeneration areas or major train lines and networks?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely, 100%. I mean, it's important, as Liam has said. The profile of the purchaser, the investor, they need this access for the people, whether it be the tenant or the owner occupier. Take Birmingham as a whole, and yes, Liam has spoken obviously as Birmingham, but just to bring it back into the region that is Gun Quarter, and what attracted us to that was, well, it was the story, the history, access obviously to the likes of Coolmore Row, Snow Hill train station, obviously HS2, but it was the attraction of the actual area as well, and seeing the other regeneration that was going on. I mean, yes, that's a wider scope. It's happening in Jewellery Quarter. It's now happening in the Gun Quarter. I would say Gun Quarter was that little bit closer, but I'm talking minutes here. It's nothing. Nothing to be argued about. But it was the attraction also of the population, the amount of universities that were within the locality as well. That was, for us.
And I think that goes. Sorry, go on.
that part of the city, for anyone that doesn't know Birmingham, is what I call a key growth zone. And on the screen there, you've obviously got the jewellery quarter, which 15 years ago went through a huge transformation, and it's now probably where you see the premium values in the city, and also the highest possible rents. And it is a conservation. So John, you're absolutely right, aren't you? With the last project you did, Photographic Works, was there, and we've seen obviously growth in that project. But the Gun Quarter is the next one. But interestingly enough, the Gun Quarter is closer to CBD, it's closer to the universities, it's closer to HS2, and it's also closer to the Children's Hospital as well. So tenant profile, there's actually a wider pool of people that actually live in that corridor. And I think that's probably why I think Paper Yard itself is fundamentally set for really good growth and obviously sustainability with all of those types of tenants that could potentially live there.
Yeah, 100%. It was, I mean, the first thing that attracted Patrick and I was the location. You know, having done Photographic Works and Jewellery Quarter, knowing that we were that bit closer, and that is important. You know, that is incredibly important, and easy access, not just to infrastructure, whether it be a railway station, but it's bars, restaurants, gym, and obviously your place of work as well.
Yeah,
definitely. And I think that echoes sort of what we can see on the map, right? We can see here, hopefully you can see my cursor, but the Paper Yard logo, and surrounding it, you've got two of the major universities, the major rail lines. From a connectivity perspective, it really does tick all the boxes. And I think if I look at any investment or development we've brought to market over the last 13 years, the ones that have really outperformed others are the ones that have the direct exposure to the educational side of things, so proximity to universities, but also areas where the graduates are staying. That's typically in an area which is near the CBD. So when you've got a location or a development which is goes hand in hand with both, it definitely ticks the boxes. And then finally, next to the railway lines, which you can see in abundance on the screen as well. So location is as cheesy as it sounds. When you look at the statistics and the case studies that we've done over the last 13 years, by far when we hit all three, they're the ones that will always outperform. Okay, and on the education side of things, obviously, Liam, you're Midlands based, you're in Birmingham every day. And we spoke about the population, 40% of it being under the age of 30. Are you seeing more and more companies now moving there and looking for that more graduate type role, and sort of the employment now increasing with post-university or college individuals?
Yeah, look, the talent pool obviously in coming out of these universities is endless. So obviously that is attractive for companies to obviously move to the city, and they're benefiting from that. And so obviously graduates with the blue chip companies taking advantage of those key graduate roles. Look, it's the bigger companies that ultimately have the graduate sort of enterprises available. The more bigger companies that come into the city, the more opportunities there are for graduates. And that's why the graduate retention rate has increased significantly over the last sort of 10, 20 years, really. I think when you look at the screen there, Lewis, if you've got it's actually more than 80,000 students. It's 80,000 across those three major universities.
Those three, yeah.
But if you've got, call it a third of those graduating every year, so let's just say 20,000 as a 25% ratio, and you've got 49% of them staying, that's 12,500 students, albeit they may not all want to stay in the city. I'd say the vast majority of them will be, because that's where they're going to be working.
Yeah,
there's only about 2,000 to 4,000 apartments built in Birmingham every single year, and there's 12,500 brand new tenants. Now, I think that tells you a lot about the undersupply, and that is the same across a lot of cities, but more so for Birmingham. This is a real fact, and that is what is underpinning the rental growth, and obviously ultimately the icing on the cake is the capital appreciation.
I think more so, and John, you'll know more about this than anyone on the call. The cost of build, the cost of buying land, the time it takes to go through planning and Gateway 2 with the new building safety regs, it's nowhere near what it was 4, 5, 6 years ago. So we're now actually seeing less developments and less units come to market, or the time it takes is significantly longer. which again plays right into an investor's hand as a landlord perspective, because that demand doesn't stop. The students graduating don't just stop because there's less properties coming to market. Companies don't stop relocating to areas or moving their headquarters because there's less properties coming to market. So as a business, that's where we're trying to do the research analysis of, well, if you've got less supply coming in, but that constant demand growing and growing and growing, it's like any asset class. More people trying to buy than sell, prices increase in property terms, trying to rent them what's available. Again, your rental market also increases substantially.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest threat to delivery of more homes in the UK is construction inflation. This is going to have an effect on the purchase of land, is already, but it has led, as you just said, in the last 4 or 5 years, has led to less homes being built. Land is still being bought, but they're just not being built. Yes, the planning system isn't great, but it's getting better slowly but surely. But yeah, the biggest the amount of delivery, if it's staying the same, I think that's the best we currently have, if not falling. But there's a huge pipeline out there, but it's becoming less and less viable at the moment for certain guys. Yeah,
and Liam touched on it before. Some of the major corporates that have now based themselves there, and we've only got to look at the finance sector. The likes of Goldman's, HSBC, Deutsche have relocated their retail headquarters from Canary Wharf into the Midlands, and by doing so, they don't just make everyone redundant; they offer relocation packages. So whether those individuals who are moving there are buying or renting is actually irrelevant. They still need somewhere to live. That, coupled with the retention rate and then the lack of properties coming to market, all of a sudden it starts looking like an unbelievable opportunity. And that's where both API and Hatchbury are proud to present the paper yard. So just before we go into the development, before we get stuck into the meat and potatoes of it, as John would say, I just want to show a CGI fly through that will hopefully give you an idea of location, proximity to different things, and give you a quick understanding of the internals before we get into the development itself. Okay, so John, if I can just hand over to you just to give some of the headline, I suppose, figures around the development. So completion date, location, number of units, so on and so forth.
Yeah, Paper Yard is a scheme of 77 apartments. Obviously, as I mentioned before, based in the Gun Quarter, close to the CBD of Birmingham. Construction is moving along well now. And we're looking at completion of Q2 of next year, early part probably, but these things are a movable feast. It's when we ever go into a bit the planning or the architecture, the design, we first and foremost look at the historical or the history of that site. We found out that in the past it's had various uses. Most recently as a handbag factory. Previous to that, it was a paper press. Why there was a paper press in the gun quarter, I have no idea. And before that, it was actually a religious hall known as the People's Hall. So it's gone through variations. When we try and design design a new development, we want to make sure that each individual unit is well proportioned. It's light, it's roomy, it's a relaxing and calming place, and which somewhere you can be proud and comfortable to live, whether you own it or whether you rent it.
Yeah. And I think just looking at the screen here, a big thing for me, which I think has been a massive concept change really post-COVID, is the floor-to-ceiling windows, allowing maximum light to come into the units because it makes them feel more spacious. It gives that greater sense of freedom. Then when you have the balcony to go with that as well, it's an added bonus for me. Service charge, I think if you look at anywhere in the UK now, to get under £3 a foot is extremely difficult. And ultimately, the lowest the service charge we can get, the better the net yield will be. So when we look at sort of a cash flow or an ROI perspective, ultimately that's going to show greater than maybe something that's got a larger or more chunkier service charge attached to it. Yields, we're going to touch on yields quite a lot over the next couple of slides because we've got two different strategies depending on the investors that we're dealing with. You can actually do short-term lets on this development where we're going to see yields of up to 12%, and we've got some information around the ideal sort of tenant profile, or for me, that is the optimal strategy given the location and proximity to major landmarks within the location. Liam, if I can hand over to you here, again, just to sort of run through your Mr. Birmingham, so proximity and where we're going to see different things on the map.
Yeah, so obviously, like you said earlier, Lewis, location. It is cheesy, but it is a fact. Anyone buying a property, it's all about that. What makes it saleable in the future, all that sort of stuff. Now, as you can see on the screen, that gold perimeter shows the central business district, which has grown phenomenally over the last sort of 10 years. So you can see on the page there's some global recognized sort of brands. Most of those are head offices as well. And then obviously it shows where the retail is as well. So it's not just about where people work. These offices are surrounded by amazing F&B, food and bars and restaurants, just 5 Michelin star restaurants within half a mile walk from Paper Yard, which is absolutely amazing. And then obviously, as you can see there, just to the left of the screen, you can see the HS2 logo. So it's at the foot of that building there. So I say the other day I walked it 12 minutes. It's a very, very direct and easy route. All the universities around there as well. So strategically, it's very, very well positioned. It's one of the most central developments, not only available today, but ever built in the city.
Yeah, and I think if you look at comparable prices surrounding that particular area, it's extremely well priced and very, very competitive. When you then have the option to short-term let it and the proximity to the CBD and other major landmarks, like I said before, for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. Yeah. Internals. So, John, colour concept, sort of the very light finishes. Is that something that Hatchbury would typically roll out across all developments, or is this specific to Paper Yard?
This is very specific to Paper Yard. So there's every site is, to be honest with you, we come up with a skip. Well, I say the royal we sort of lean on our interior design team who come up with reference to Paper Yard. I suppose one thing that we will always insist on is, reference again, I'm repeating myself here a bit, but is creating light within a home and good proportions in each and every room. With regards to Paper Yard, it was the use of wood. We sort of went down this wood, obviously paper in terms of, again, the tiling, looking to the paper again. Was trying to create as much as outside space. And just to reiterate the point that you made, Lewis, is that post-COVID, this has become more and more important. The ability or people realizing they don't want to be just stuck in boxes. And sometimes that does get lost. And we do go to that extra detail, whether it be on the external facade, in terms of the brick detail that we've gone to, or when we go inside into the common parts, and then into the actual apartments themselves. Even the sort of the balconies are supposed to represent paper. So there's a little nods. I mean, they're not obvious, but they are there. So with regards to the paper yard, that was definitely our thinking.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Just before we go on to short-term lets, what I want to do is just run through a construction update video. So Liam, you were on site last week, I believe it was.
Yes.
And we got some footage. So what we're going to do now is play it. So again, you can all get a feel, be comfortable with the progression as to where it's at, and you can start actually seeing the development come to life.
I'm Liam from API Global, and we're at Paper Yard here today in Birmingham city centre. Development being built by award-winning developers Hatchbury. We're here to take a look and see what the progress is looking like so far. Let's go and have a look. So as you can see, this is the main entrance. So we've got a triple height entrance foyer with 2 points of security, so nice and secure. This area is going to house the co-working space, a bit of communal seating, so a really nice, friendly, welcoming area. Through to this part of the building or reception area, you're going to have a wellness suite where there's going to be private yoga, Pilates classes. And then through here, you're going to have a private post room. And at the end of the corridor, a private bike store housing up to 100 bikes. The development's got 2 lifts and 2 stair cores going to all floors. On the first floor, there's a communal courtyard, which we'll go and have a look at now. So this floor here is classed as what we call upper ground floor. This has an entrance out towards the courtyard. On this level, you've got some apartments that actually benefit from private terraces out onto the courtyard area, which will be fantastic. As you can see, there's quite a lot of equipment being housed in the courtyard right now, but you can see the space differential between one part of the building to the other. This is going to be a great space for people to come out, especially when it's this kind of weather, to sit outside, have a coffee and stuff. There'll be landscaped areas and some communal seating. And like I said, some of these units that face out to the courtyard actually have private terraces. Most of these have been sold, but we do have a couple remaining on that side of the courtyard. Let's go and have a look at one of the apartments and see where they are so far. Walking into one of the apartments, on this level, and also the next floor up and lower floor, you have got plumbing, electrics, pretty much complete. You'll see that obviously the kitchens are being installed as we speak. So you get a bit of an idea of what the specification is here. The colour scheme, as you can see, is pretty much the same. Well, it is the same throughout every single apartment. So a really nice neutral tops, a nice walnut effect cabinet. This is kind of like a Scandinavian-inspired interior. You can also see that the sanitary ware, kitchen taps, all those sorts of things, they're Blanca. So it's not a standard specification. And also the splashback tiling is really, really nice. So nice modern interiors, which is obviously perfect for the type of tenants that are going to be living here, which is obviously the young professionals. So this is a 2-bed. So you've got a bedroom there, which obviously outlooks the courtyard. You've got some doors going out onto what would be a private terrace in this particular apartment. And then you've got the second or master bedroom, which is a great space. You've got an area where you'd have your wardrobes, and then you've got an ensuite just in there, which again is being fitted as we speak. And then this is the main shower room. So you've got a double shower cubicle. Again, really good sanitary ware, amazing tiling as well. And then what this would be a utility cupboard. So you'll have plumbing for a washing machine. You're going to have your MVHR units, all the boring stuff, but nice and tidily housed away. One thing that I would say about this development is the communal spaces are really big. So the corridors are nice and wide. the communal entrance hallway, that triplet aspect, entrance foyer. You just feel a bit more space, even though it's quite a boutique-y development. You'll notice, obviously, all the wiring is exposed at the minute, all the plumbing. Obviously, that would all be covered, but it does show how much goes into fire safety. You've got sprinkler systems, not only just in the apartments, also in all the corridors. And then at the end of each corridor, you've got a smoke vent, which obviously takes out the smoke should there be a fire.
So it's almost like you've done that before, Liam. So hopefully that gives everyone a nice insight as to actually how far the development is progressing. Like we mentioned before, this is going to be completing in Q2. So still plenty of time for people to sort of get mortgages in place and whatnot. I think for me, one of the most attractive points that I mentioned before is around price. You can invest for as little as £48,000 in securing a one bed in this development, and around £65,000 you're securing a two bed. So when you actually look at it in comparable to other investments and size of deposits that we're currently doing, or other investors are currently doing, or you as distribution partners are offering to your clients, to get in for such a small amount, it makes it, for me, an added incentive. Okay, so we mentioned before, or I certainly mentioned before, I believe the optimal strategy for this particular development is to have short-term lets based on location and proximity. Short-term lets versus sort of your standard long-term or more AST. Well, yields, gross yields are pretty much double or more than double if you're looking at the lower side of your AST. The reason why that is because you charge a nightly rate at a higher amount as opposed to agreeing a monthly amount for a set period of time. When we talk about sort of hospital demand and visitor demand and the occupancy diversity, that's something that we're going to touch on in the next slide, which for me massively underpins the whole short-term let and sort of the nightly stay investment case behind this. Because I think when you look at tourism, and Birmingham has a huge tourism sector, and Liam, I'm sure, and John, you'll agree with this. Whilst tourism is huge and it's extremely popular, it's also quite seasonal. Wherever you look at healthcare and education and businesses, that's an all year round concept. That just doesn't change because it's cold. And that's something I want to touch on in the next slide. But I think the most important part to understand for distribution partners and our clients out on the call is whether it's a long-term tenant that you're going to secure, which is your guaranteed income, or whether you're looking at the more nightly rate play and what I consider the optimal strategy that I've mentioned. They're both fully managed end-to-end solutions. One doesn't differ over the other, i.e. the service that you get. They're both fully managed solutions and services for you. It just really depends on the strategy you're going to go through. But just touching on to the short-term let demand. So, Liam, could you just give a bit of an insight? So we spoke about proximity, particularly to the CBD, and we've seen on the map before about the proximity to the universities. Do you want to really get under the skin of it about what's actually driving that nightly rate or that short-term let demand?
Yeah, 100%. And I agree. I think this is the optimal way of getting the best return on investment in this particular development. It is genuinely unique. It's very rare that you are able to do short-term rental fully permitted. So where this is located, it's just a stone's throw from Birmingham Children's Hospital, which is, I believe, one of the top 5 pediatric hospitals in the world. So what does that mean? That means that, unfortunately, children are having to travel all over the world for specialist treatment, and they can be in hospital for months on end. And parents traveling with their children, they don't want to be in a hotel. One, it's very expensive. 2, there's no kitchens or own personal space. They want to be in somewhere they can call sort of home from home during what is obviously a really tricky part of their life. So PayPR will offer that. You've got fantastic sort of like lounge areas for the apartments, you've got your own kitchens, you've got your own space, and that's obviously going to be a driving factor for families maybe using PayPR as a form of accommodation whilst their children are being cared for in the hospital. Now, it literally is 100 meters away. So the level of level of hotels locally in Birmingham is only a couple of 5-star hotels in the whole city anyway. So the demand for those is very, very high. So that obviously means that the nightly rate is also pretty strong. You touched on tourism, Lewis. Yes, it is seasonal. So you benefit from those seasons, but you've also got the other demographic of people that are potentially using it as short-term rental. You've got the students' parents that potentially are coming to visit their students during term time. Bearing in mind, there's a lot of overseas students on the doorstep there. You've got the tourism. You've got global sporting events being placed in Birmingham. And also the icing on the cake, HS2. The terminus is literally around the corner. There are thousands and thousands of construction workers and specialist workers working on HS2 in Birmingham for the next decade that need places to live in the week. So your corporate stays aren't a couple of nights. They're 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, because companies want a bit of flexibility when they're obviously putting people into accommodation. And I think PayPR is perfectly placed to benefit from every single sector of that short-term let demand.
And John, did that play into sort of your thought process as well? Proximity to CBD and hospital when you bought the land?
Yeah, I absolutely 100%. I'd add to that the universities again, the education. I think something that we haven't actually brought up is the creative industry in terms of TV and film. You know, BBC. You've got new studios with the success of such shows that are based in and around Birmingham. I forget the name of the what's the one with the Shelbys?
Peaky Blinders.
Peaky Blinders, obviously.
I mean, that's home to the gun quarter, right?
Yeah, it's based around the canals. Yeah, correct. And I think that's a big draw as well. You know, and with Digbeth being so close by as well. So, but yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Lovely. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Right, reservation process. So we've actually had a question come through, which is always great to see. What is the process to buy a unit, to reserve a unit? So you have a £5,000 reservation fee. That's not an additional payment. That's an advance payment to secure the unit. You will then pay 20% within the next 28 days, minus the £5,000 already paid. And then the balance on completion in Q2, which would be 80%. Obviously, we have a mortgage brokerage, Valorum Global, who can provide financing. So depending on where you're based in the world, there's actually loan to values up to 80% should stress test passed. But we've also got a bridging finance business. If you can't get the funds quick enough or there's delay in your mortgage process, we then also have plan B to ensure that you're not completing late on the development. There are a couple of questions that have come through, which again are always positive. Are there any incentives if I reserve today? Which I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear that one. So yeah, we've actually been able to agree £1,000 legal fee contribution for anyone that's attended today, or for anyone, if you're one of our distribution partners, for any clients of yours that would like to buy, there is £1,000 legal fee contribution, which will be paid back to you as an investor or the client once you have exchanged contracts. One of the other questions I've seen come through is, can we split the payment plan if I don't have the £48,000 now? Good news is we can. There is a 10% down, 10% over 3 months if needed. That's not going to be for everyone. I suppose that would be if required only. But I think if you look at the capital deployment from outset, £48,000, around 60,000 US or just over, in comparison to investments that people are buying globally, It's not a huge sum of money, but if the flexibility is needed, John and Patrick have agreed that they'll actually split it over a 3-month period. There is a question that's come in. For GCC buyers, what should they provide for additional fees over and above the buying price? So this isn't just applicable to GCC. This for any purchases globally. You have completion costs. Now, the completion costs are made up of stamp duty, which is your tax that you pay the UK government for actually purchasing the unit. That will vary depending on where you're based. And also depending on if it's for personal use, first-time buyer, or investment-led. So Steed, if you've got your specific requirements, if you want to drop your API account manager or contact a quick message based on the profile or demographics you're referring to, then we'll be able to come back with the correct answer. But yeah, you'll pay completion costs such as stamp duty as well as your solicitor fees. One thing which I think really is important to know, and we've got clients and partners from all over the world on currently, and we've not long come back from the US. And one of the major differences, and you also see this in other locations in the world, is you pay an annual property tax. I was in Miami only in February, and they're paying up to 4% a year sometimes just to own the property. In the UK, there is no annual property tax, such as you have an initial stamp duty contribution, which is paid. Depending on your circumstances, there may be income tax due or corporation tax, depending on how you hold it. And then you have your tax when you essentially sell the asset as well, capital gain. So there is no ongoing annual property tax at all. Thank you for everyone that's attended today. The turnout has been exceptional. We've had over 100 people join from all over the globe, which is great to see. Hopefully you've got a better understanding now, 1, about Hatchbury, John and Patrick's background, as well as the business. 2, Birmingham as a whole. If you're not familiar with the city or you've never been before, the insight that Liam and John touched on, I found was extremely useful, and the development itself, the benefits and reasons why we believe short-term lets for this particular location is the optimal strategy. But also, if you do want something more conservative, i.e. your standard long-term tenant, this also ticks the boxes for this. The recording of the webinar will be sent out to those that have attended. So if you are one of our distribution partners and you want to send it on to your clients, you will get this in your email after the webinar. If there are any other questions, as I mentioned, please reach out to your API account manager and they'll be more than happy to assist. But that's it from me today. Gentlemen, thank you for joining. And let's take any questions, just let us know. Thank you
so much, Lewis.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, man.